This is Midnight Sun, the communication hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign, with which we aim to create a tribe of people of all colors willing to put their talents at the service of the earth and its community of life. Obviously, ours is a call to action. But as we will see in today's program, action is not enough. Throughout history, we have seen attempts to change the world through political action, through economic action, through technology, and even through activism. And we have certainly changed many things, but many of the changes did not last long. Moreover, none of these changes have prevented us from falling into the situation in which we find ourselves today, of climate emergency and mass species extinction. So, in addition to action, which is essential, something else needs to be done. That is why I would like to ask you a series of questions in this program. Can our civilization change if people and their relationships with the world do not change? Can a society change if its members change only on the outside without changing on the inside? Even on a more personal level, which directly concerns your private life, how do you expect your life to change if your way of seeing reality, your way of being in the world and relating to it does not change? This is what we are going to talk about in today's program, which is the first part of a series of 2 or 3 programs in which I will talk about the psychological construct of worldview. Today's program is entitled "Tell Me How You See the World, and I Tell You What You Have Done with It," or what you have done with your life, if we look at it from a more personal level. So, welcome to Midnight Sun. If you are listening, you are already part of the tribe.
Midnight Sun, directed by Grian Cutanda.
As I was saying, action is essential. We have to act if we want to avoid the collapse of our civilization. Indeed, action has been very effective in history. Over the centuries, political action, economic action, technology, activism have brought great breakthroughs to humankind. But I must insist, action is not enough. And while it is true that not all the actions that should have been taken, the situation we are in could not have been avoided unless we had made an inner change. Why is this option not considered in our societies, and why is action the only way forward? Because the worldview that prevails globally at the moment is the materialist worldview. It is the worldview of the West, a worldview that understands that only matter exists, and this generates a bias. The bias that leads us to the conviction that things can only be solved from the material world. Well, now, from other approaches and from the new scientific paradigm, the complex systems scientific paradigm, get used to this term, if there is no inner change, things are hardly going to change in the outside world, because we will continue to fall into the same problems of perception. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And what does education bring about, if not an inner change? More and more philosophers, more social scientists, even natural scientists are talking about changing the collective worldview as the most direct and fastest way out of this climate crisis we have got ourselves into, or at least to mitigate it. But in addition, as I pointed out at the beginning, this change of worldview cannot only change our societies, but also your personal life. And this is because if you change your vision of reality, you will see life in a different way. You will be in the world in a different way. In this regard, 3 American researchers, Schlitz, Vieten, and Miller, from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, in a 2010 research study defined worldview transformation as a fundamental shift in perspective that results in long-lasting changes in people's sense of self, perception of relationship to the world around them, and way of being. This is exactly what it is about, changing our perception of the world around us, and from there, changing the relationship we have with it.
Midnight Sun is a radio program that seeks to foster the process of social transformation needed to address the social, climate, and extinction emergency we are now entering. Our goal, that you put your talents at the service of the earth and the terrestrial community of life. Join the tribe at the Midnight Sun, the social media hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign.
So, I am going to propose you a little exercise of imagination in order to clarify what worldviews entail. We are going to imagine 2 people with 2 different views of reality, with 2 ways of thinking and therefore of being in the world, of relating to other people, to animals, to trees, to the natural world. We are going to call one of these human beings the alpha human being, and the other the omega human being for clarification. So, how does the alpha human being see the world? What attitudes does they have? How do they interpret the things that happen to them? The alpha human being basically confines his experiences to the material world. They may have religious ideas or they may not. There are people who may claim to have religious beliefs and yet do not experience the spiritual world at all. The alpha human being lives in the split between him or herself and the rest of the world. In a way, they live themselves as a separate entity from the rest of the world. This leads, as is evident, to a certain individualism and logically to competition in their movements through the world, since the defense of the interests of their isolated self leads to the confrontation of interests with others. This is the origin of certain ideologies, especially those based on economics, which speak of the self-made man. We'll talk about this later, about the self-made man, as if the rest of society did not exist. Important values for the alpha human being are freedom, but freedom as an egoic right. We will see later that there is another kind of freedom. Independence, success, effectiveness, social recognition, comfort, fun, and a basic hedonism. He or she is a person who puts rationality above all else, while considering imagination as a byproduct of the mind. Reason must always and everywhere prevail. He or she attaches great value to science and technology and is a pragmatist. If something is useless, it can be dispensed with. He or she also thinks that human beings are at the pinnacle of creation, that all the elements of nature, wind, water, are inert things, that plants and trees have hardly any consciousness, if any, and that animals may have some consciousness, even feelings, but they cannot be compared to human beings. And with regard to their fellow humans, they think, we'll get along fine if they don't get in the way of my interests. If they go against my interest, we'll have problems. In contrast to this worldview, we find the worldview of the human being that we have named Omega. For these people, the material world is not the only field of experience. There is much more to human experience, and while they may not be clear about the existence of a God, they do admit some kind of essence, spirit, or consciousness, along with a capacity for awe and wonder before the universe. There is a perception that there is something more, beyond matter. The Omega human being recognizes the limits of their self, is aware of the boundaries set by their skin, but does not fail to see that they have infinite connections with the world. They are aware of not being isolated from the world, in conflict with it, but connected to it. There is also a certain awareness of the collective, of the common good. They know altruism and empathy, and beyond competition, they consider cooperation and collaboration as fundamental values of survival. Man is not self-made, but lives in a society and takes advantage of this society to build his life and his achievements. This is a very different way of looking at relations with society. Their values also include freedom, but freedom as a collective good, not as a selfish right, which is how alpha human beings see it. They also value independence, but without losing sight of the common good, as they are aware that we are all in the same boat. Emotional, aesthetic and ethical values are fundamental for these people, and although they value reason and rationality, they do so in the right measure. Reason, emotion, ethics and aesthetics are on an equal footing. Truth, love, goodness and beauty. These people are able to harmoniously integrate science and spirituality, imagination and logic, mind and heart, culture and nature, concepts that alpha humans juxtapose and confront as irreconcilable. Moreover, Omega humans are not so pragmatic and do not consider things to have value in terms of their usefulness. Things, beings, the rest of the world have an intrinsic value in and of themselves and cannot be evaluated by their usefulness to human beings. Finally, they consider that the human being is not the pinnacle of creation, but just another thread in the fabric of life, Many of them even feel that everything has a consciousness, and this leads them to consider the needs not only of other human beings, but of all beings. Hence their extensive exercise of empathy in an attempt to understand the feelings and needs of the rest of the world beings. Ultimately, these people are capable of renouncing self-interest if they know that this will benefit society or the Earth species as a whole. So, evaluating these two different views of reality, what kind of world do you think each of these human beings will live in? How will they have treated their world, their habitat? What will they have turned it into? And coming back to the more personal, how do you think being in the world in one way or the other might affect all the issues in your life? As hard as the times ahead may be, at Midnight Sun we will keep believing that we can still build an alternative future. Our secret, radical hope, however unreal it may seem. Join the tribe of Midnight Sun. Midnight Sun, if you are on the other side, listening to us, consider yourself already part of the tribe. Today we are talking about worldviews, and it must be said that it is not only philosophers and social scientists who talk about their importance. Natural scientists are also talking about the significance of worldviews, including Fritjof Capra, a physicist who worked for the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California, author of The Tao of Physics, and Pierluigi Luisi, a chemist and professor at the University of Rome. These two scientists wrote a book entitled The System's View of Life in 2014, in which they said things like this. As the 21st century unfolds, it is becoming more and more evident that the major problems of our time, energy, the environment, climate change, food security, financial security, cannot be understood in isolation. They are systemic problems, which means that they are all interconnected and interdependent. Ultimately, these problems must be seen as just different facets of one single crisis, which is largely a crisis of perception. It derives from the fact that most people in our modern society, and especially our large social institutions, subscribe to the concepts of an outdated worldview, a perception of reality inadequate for dealing with our overpopulated, globally interconnected world. They then go on to say, there are solutions to the major problems of our time, some of them even simple, but they require a radical shift in our perceptions, our thinking, our values. And indeed, we are now at the beginning of such a fundamental change of worldview in science and society, a change of paradigms as radical as the Copernican revolution. In short, what philosophers and scientists who have studied the subject are telling us, and what the new scientific paradigm is telling us, is that there is no objective reality out there, and that everything depends on the point of perception from which reality, the world, is perceived, contemplated. It all depends, you see, on the narrative, the story. You will have heard this a lot in politics in recent years. It all depends on the narrative with which we tell that reality to ourselves. Ultimately, and simplifying, since the range of worldviews is diverse, we could speak of two quite different worldviews. The alpha human worldview would be the modernist worldview, which has brought us many positive things, but which, having passed its expiry date, has plunged us into the current climate and extinction crisis. And the omega human worldview, which is what Annick de Wit, a Dutch psychologist, one of the world's leading specialists in worldviews, calls the integrative worldview. This is the vision of the world that we collectively have to develop if we are to survive as a species. So, what would the world be like with an alpha civilization, and what would it be like with an omega civilization? Well, the alpha world, as understood by the modernist worldview, is the world we live in today, a materialistic, mechanistic world where the intrinsic value of life is not perceived, nor is consciousness. Feelings take a secondary place to reason. A world where individualism reigns, individualism and all the values associated with it, where in the end the law of the jungle prevails, precisely because what prevails is individualism, which makes us think that we are not connected with the rest of humanity, with the rest of the species and the planet. In short, it is the world that neoliberal globalization has brought us, but also the other extreme of the same modernism, Marxist materialism, although this has more humanizing values than neoliberal capitalism. The alpha world is a world based on competition, on pragmatism, on the functionalist attitude of if something does not serve a function for humans, it is worthless and we can disregard it. And this is a very serious mistake, a mistake that is leading us to disaster. The modernist worldview is a worldview based on an excluding rationalism without emotion, ethics or aesthetics, which gives rise to a science without conscience, the science that brought the atomic bomb, the science that brought insecticides that destroy everything for huge economic benefits, the science that is causing so much damage in the world, because it is a science without ethics, without conscience. It is a worldview with a blind faith in technology, and in this utopia that technology will solve everything, when internal change is something that human beings have to work on, each one of us from within ourselves. In short, it is also that vision of the world where the human being is at the top of everything and the rest of the species are mere supporting actors. This is what is leading us to the mass extinction of species. In contrast to this alpha modernist worldview, we are proposing the omega integrative worldview, which will prevail in the world after the current ecological crisis. It is a vision of the world based on the awareness of a planetary community of life, where we relate as equals to all other species, an enchanted world where we can relate to trees and animals, regardless of their value to human interests. The self, the individual, is connected to the world, lives in relationship. From here, the concept of individualism is a pathetic belief from a dark past, where the law of the jungle prevailed. The Omega world is a world of empathy, compassion, feeling. It is a world where the importance of relationships is recognized and where ultimately no one is self-made. That capitalist ideal of self-made man is now seen as a delusion. No one is self-made. We are all made within a society. We stand on the shoulders of those who built that society over the centuries. We build on what hundreds of thousands, millions of people contributed to humanity before us. Ultimately, in the Omega world, people are able to sacrifice their own self-interest for the common good of the earth and its community of life. So, how might we more specifically define and characterize the worldview we need to develop in order to survive as a species? Well, it would be an ecocentric rather than an anthropocentric worldview. What does this mean? It means that we would no longer see the human being as the apex of creation and the center of priorities. The earth as a whole and its community of life would be the axis of priorities in decision making. In other words, we need to develop an ecocentric worldview, where the earth as a whole is what really matters, and human beings are but a thread within the web of life that is the earth. It is not a coincidence that we have empirical evidence in this regard, specifically in the research of Cassie and Scott, 2006, Hedlund, DeWitt and colleagues, 2014, Kortenkamp and Moore, 2001, and Thompson and Barton, 1994. This research shows that people with an ecocentric orientation are more likely to act on their pro-environment attitudes and engage in conserving behaviors. In contrast, anthropocentric interest is associated with more apathy toward the environment and less conserving behavior. This is verbatim from Thompson and Barton, 1994, page 156. In other words, we have to forget the idea that human beings have to be above the rest of the species. We have to forget about that now, and we have to develop a vision of the world where what is important is the planet as a whole, the whole planetary community of life. In addition, this new worldview poses a dichotomy in contrast to materialism and Newtonian Cartesian mechanistic worldview. Against this vision that everything is material and everything is mechanical, that everything in the universe works like clockwork, even the parts of the human body are changed as if they were those of a car. Faced with this mechanistic view, which may have brought many good things, but which nevertheless is leading us now to disaster, an organicist view is put forward. This is important. What does organicist mean? It means that we should begin to see the Earth as an organism. In fact, even as the Gaia theory says, which we will talk about shortly here, that we should see it as a living organism. The Earth, even the universe, as organisms. We stop seeing the universe as a mechano and start seeing it as an organic entity. Another characteristic of the new worldview is the dropping of matter as the foundation of reality and the adoption of consciousness in its place. In physics, all this is being discussed on the basis of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but I am not going to go into slippery slopes because I am not a specialist on the subject and because we cannot elaborate much further. And finally, in addition to placing reason, emotion, ethics and aesthetics on an equal footing, the new worldview is characterized by a shift from the importance of objects to the importance of relationships and interdependencies. In the current worldview, the focus is on the atom, the cell, the individual, the objects differentiated from the rest of reality. However, in the new worldview, it is the interrelationships, the interdependencies between these individual objects and their processes which are important. The sacred phrase of the Lakota people is Mitakuye Oyasin, which means all our relationships. It is not surprising that, according to my own research, the indigenous peoples of the Americas show more components of systems thinking in their traditional narratives than the rest of traditional stories in the world. In short, we need to develop a worldview that will enable us to emerge from this crisis in which we are already immersed. This integrative worldview is the same worldview that permeates the Earth Charter, an international document that many people do not know about, but which you will want to discover. Do you know the Earth Charter? The Earth Charter is an international declaration of ethical principles for the respect and care of life, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, democracy, non-violence and peace. But it is also a worldwide movement which seeks to inspire in all people a new sense of global interdependence and share responsibility for the well-being of the whole human family, the community of life and future generations, thus becoming a vision of hope and a call to action. Learn more about the Earth Charter at earthcharter.org. Earth Charter, turning conscience into action. So let us summarize what we have covered today. First of all, external changes alone are not going to get us out of the climate and extinction crisis in which we find ourselves. So, we will have to make changes within ourselves as well. Second, we have seen that depending on the worldview we hold, so will be the world we live in. So will be our reality, so will be our society, and so will be everything that happens to us. Hence the need for a worldview shift, not only at the individual but also at the collective level. We need to change our understanding of reality and our relationship with the world around us. To put it briefly, from the alpha world in which we now find ourselves, we will have to try to build the omega world. From this new worldview we have been talking about, a completely different worldview. Finally, we have discussed the characteristics of the worldview to be developed, which would be based on ecocentrism, That is, the human being is no longer the center of the universe in our beliefs, but the planet Earth and its community of life. The new worldview would be based on an organicist approach, which would see the Earth, even the universe, as living organisms. It would also be an approach based on consciousness and not on matter. An approach based on interrelationships and not on the individual elements of reality. An approach based on reason, emotion, ethics, and aesthetics, and not on reason alone. In short, looking at it all together, we would be talking about what I called Worldview education in 2016. We would not be talking about a new discipline, but about a transversal educational approach. But let us not forget action, which will always be needed. The work is inner and outer, action and inner change. They need each other if we are to achieve the goal of preventing the collapse of our civilization. That is why we are proposing this global campaign, Rainbow Warriors 3.5, which we encourage you to join in order to put your talents at the service of the Earth and its community of life. And finally, moving from the collective to the individual level, you should also consider how everything we are talking about here can affect your life. Because the change in your worldview will also affect your personal life. Depending on how you see the world, so will be your life. Both in individual and collective terms, we are going to give seminars, courses, workshops. We are going to try to transmit this worldview, and we are going to do activities to try to expand and go into detail on all these issues. So now you know. Join the tribe of all colors, the Midnight Sun tribe.
In a world facing an uncharted future because of the planetary emergency we are now entering, we need voices to help sow the radical hope that we can build an alternative tomorrow. Become a patron, and for $1 a month, join our tribe. Find us on Patrion as Midnight Sun.
This is the end of our broadcasting space. Thank you for listening to us. We will try to be here on a weekly basis, although we can't give any guarantees, because obviously we don't make a living from this and we have many fronts open. That is why we are asking you to give us a little help. We would like to thank Kim Robertson, the Celtic harp player who provides the tune for this program, for allowing us to use her melody here. We would like to thank John Mario Diaz and Radio Chakaruna in Medellín, Colombia, which is the first independent radio station that is broadcasting this program, and we hope that many more stations will join soon. I would like to give a special thanks to Blake Kendall for the call signs he made for us, which you have been hearing throughout the program. And I would like to thank Marta Ventura who is the soul behind Midnight Sun, the structure that allows this program to be broadcast. And finally, just to say, please spread the word about this program. We need to create a tribe of all colors, Rainbow Warriors 3.5. We need to gather millions of people putting their talents at the service of the earth and changing their worldview. Spread as much as you can. Thank you for that. So, we bid farewell until next week. May the sun shine for you at midnight.
To avoid the social collapse we are heading towards because of the climate and extinction emergency, we are going to need 3.5% of the population to take action. That means we need help. Lots of help. If you have an independent radio station and want to share Midnight Sun's radio programs on it, find out more at midnightsun.com.es/broadcasting. Midnight Sun, the social media hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign.
Midnight Sun, el sol de medianoche.